Hello everyone, welcome back to chapter 4. So in previous chapter we explore the wide range of services offered by Microsoft Azure. So now it's time to dive deeper into one of the most essential categories, that is compute services. So in this chapter we will first understand what compute means in the context of cloud computing, and then we will explore the most commonly used compute services provided by Microsoft. So in that we'll be covering Azure Virtual Functions, Azure App Service, Azure Functions, Azure Kubernetes Service, and Azure Container Instance. So in this video, we'll focus on understanding what virtual machines are along with some examples. We will also look how and where these services are used. So let's get started and explore how compute services works in Azure and why they are backbone of many cloud applications. So let's get started. So before we start exploring individual compute services, let's first understand what compute actually means in cloud computing. So in very simple terms, compute refers to the processing power and resource required to run your applications. So when we talk about compute in cloud, we are referring to the service that help you to run, host, and process your applications without the need to manage any physical servers or hardware. So let's try to understand this with very basic example. So let's say you want to host your website. So in traditional way, you need to buy a physical server, set up and configure everything and make sure it always running. But instead of cloud computing, you can simply create a virtual machines or app services on Azure, upload your code, and it's live. No worry about hardware, electricity, cooling, or maintenance. That's the power of cloud compute: on demand processing power, scalable resource, and zero infrastructure hassle. So that is nothing but the compute in cloud. So now that we understand what compute means in the cloud, let's dive into some of the core compute service provided by Azure and see how they make development and deployment easier, faster, and scalable. So that is number one, Azure Virtual Machines. So let's first understand what is a virtual machine. A virtual machine is like a full computer running in cloud. So just imagine you have a laptop, but instead of being a physical device in front of you, it's running somewhere on the Microsoft Azure server. So you will get a full control over the operating system, software, and environment, just like your physical desktop or laptop. Let's try to understand with this a simple example. So let's say a developer who wants to test application in Linux environment, but you can only have a Windows laptop. No worries. You can simply go to Azure and create a Linux virtual machine, install a web server, host your applications, and access it from anywhere, all through your browsers or remote access. That's the power of Azure virtual machines. Full control, flexibility, and accessibility. And this Azure virtual machines is coming under the service model, or we call it as infrastructure as a service. We have already covered these service models in previous chapter. So if you have not seen my previous chapter, so I request you to go to the previous chapter and check out those service models. Then you will get a better understanding of what is actually means infrastructure as a service. So now let's talk about Azure App Service. So basically, Azure App Service, it's a fully managed web hosting platform that's let you quickly deploy your website without worrying about the infrastructure setup. Again, let's try to understand with some example. So let's say you have built a full stack app using React plus Node.js for your clothing store. Instead of setting up a full virtual machines, you can simply deploy your app on Azure App Service. So Azure automatically handles scaling when traffic increases, security patching, and OS updates, along with high availability and performance. It's a great for developer who wants to focus on code, not on infrastructure. And Azure App Service is coming under the service model like platform as a service. So now let's talk about Azure Functions. So basically Azure Function is a serverless compute service, which means you can run small piece of code called functions without managing any server. These functions run only when triggers by an event like an HTTP request, database change, or message in queue. So imagine you are running an e-commerce website and you want to send a thank you email every time someone places an order. Instead of setting up a whole backend, you can just write a small Azure function that runs when new order is placed and send email to the customer. So no need to manage a server, deploy full apps, or worry about scaling. Azure take care of everything. So in this way, these Azure functions work. Then next up, Azure Kubernetes Services. So Azure Kubernetes Service is managed Kubernetes platform that allow you to orchestrate and manage containerized applications. Kubernetes help you to deploy, scale, and maintain complex app made up of multiple containers. So imagine you have a complex app with different microservices like front-end in React, back-end in Node.js, and payment service in Python. So all are packaged into a separate containers. So with Kubernetes, you can deploy and manage all them together. Kubernetes take care of scaling, rolling updates, restarting, crashed containers, and more, all in automated way. And this Kubernetes is coming under service model like PaaS, platform as a service. You focus on your container and workloads as you manage the Kubernetes control panel. And then Azure Container Instance. So Azure Container Instance provides a lightweight and serverless way to run containers in the cloud without managing servers like Kubernetes. So let's say you want to run a one-time script, maybe to convert a file or process an image inside a container. You don't want to set up Kubernetes or virtual machines. So just something fast and disposable. Then in that case, you can use Azure Container Instance. With the help of that, you can upload your Docker container, run it instantly, get result and shut down. No overhead. And this Azure Container Instance is coming under the service model like container as a service. So that's all for this chapter. Overview of compute services and their basic explanation. So in the upcoming chapter, we will explore each of these services one by one with hands-on demonstration. In that, we will start by creating Azure virtual machines and deploying apps on them. Then we will move to deploy apps on Azure App Service and much more. So if you found this video very helpful, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe to support the channel and stay updated with more real world cloud tutorials. And as I always say, keep learning, happy coding and have a great day.